Welcome to the inaugural event in the Women Leaders series, hosted by the Women's Forum of APABA-DC, which is the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of the Greater Washington, D.C. area. I'm Erica Lai. I'm an antitrust and commercial litigation counsel at Cohen & Gresser, here in my capacity as president of APABA-DC. APABA-DC is the oldest Asian American Bar Association in the D.C. area. For the past 4 decades, we've strived to meet all 3 central pillars of our mission: to serve as a voice for the APA legal community in DC, to elevate and promote the advancement of our members, and to facilitate opportunities to give back and collaborate with other community organizations. You can learn more about our bar next Thursday, December 10th, when we kick off our 40th anniversary with a virtual celebration that will include presentation of our awards to luminaries and rising stars in the DC APA community, including former Deputy Secretary of Labor, Chris Liu, a conversation with Above the Law founding editor, David Latt, and opportunities to network with APABA-DC members and supporters. Tonight's event is such a perfect illustration of what we as a bar aim to do by highlighting a true trailblazer from the APA legal community, focusing on how we as a profession can do more when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and partnering with other great organizations in doing so. I mentioned just a minute ago that this is our inaugural Women Leaders event. We have already scheduled our next one on January 14th, which will be a conversation about women in leadership within the legal profession with Jessie Liu, former U.S. Attorney for D.C. and a current partner at Skadden. One of the silver linings of this devastating pandemic is that it's shifted our programming online so that we can now connect regardless of geography or time zone. And I want to thank our co-sponsors who have helped us spread the word about tonight. So first, NAPABA, the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association, the South Asian Bar Association, SABA of North America, SABA-DC, and the American Bar Association Antitrust Law Section's new Women Connected Committee, which is focused on the recruitment, involvement, integration, and contributions of women within the antitrust bar. SABA-DC also put us in touch with Diya TV, an American South Asian broadcast television network, which is live streaming this event. Many thanks to Diya TV for helping us elevate tonight's panel. So turning to the panel itself, Kalpana Srinivasan really needs no introduction, and yet I will briefly introduce her. She is an accomplished and experienced trial lawyer who was recently elected co-managing partner of Susman Godfrey. She has secured significant victories for her clients in disputes relating to antitrust, patents, trade secrets, copyrights, media, and class actions. She's been recognized as a titan of the Plaintiffs Bar, one of the country's top trial lawyers and top women litigators in California. She has a BA from Yale, a JD with distinction from Stanford Law, and she clerked for Judge Fisher of the Ninth Circuit. She has also championed meaningful diversity, equity, and inclusion within the legal community. It is no surprise that she recently received the Cornerstone Award from SABA North America. Without further ado, I'll now pass the virtual mic and the virtual stage over to Esther Pion, a rising star in the antitrust bar and an associate at Clifford Chance, who will moderate tonight's conversation with Kalpana.
Thank you so much, Erica. We're really excited to have this conversation, this fireside chat with you, Kalpana. Thank you for being on with us.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to Erica for that very kind introduction, and to APABA-DC, NAPABA, SABA, and Women.Connected, and all of the groups that have supported this event today.
Great. We're kind of going to go through actually the way that Erica introduced herself from the very beginning. You know, we're so excited to speak to you and celebrate with you your recent election to be co-managing partner of Susman Godfrey. It's really a trailblazing moment, and I'd love to talk to you about sort of what do you see as being the significance of being the first woman in this position, as well as the first woman of color.
It has a lot of symbolic significance. One of the most fulfilling things that's happened since I was elected is just this outpouring of messages from diverse lawyers, from women lawyers, talking about how it really shifted their view of the profession and the potential they had to go up in the profession. So On that level, it's important. It's important that we see that there's a path forward, and I like to talk about that concept that you need to know the path is there to keep going and to try to excel and reach for the next level. And so on that stroke, it's very important. It's also important generally for law firms. Maybe there's a conception that when you change up your leadership, or that when you put somebody into a position that may look different than what the outside world expected, that transition is going to come with a lot of bumps or challenges. And it is a very important message to carry that, law firms can do this. Law firms can have diverse leadership and look to develop the next generation of lawyers and have women and diverse lawyers in these positions without really a fundamental shift in what they do. And I'm hoping that my election to this role and seeing a lot of women and diverse lawyers moving into firm management will just confirm that this isn't some sea change that people need to view it as. We need to become acclimatized to the idea that this should be the norm.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned, one of the significant points is that others are seeing that there is a path. And I'd be really curious to hear, what was your pathway to leadership? As we know, you served on various, leadership positions within the firm prior to the most recent election. So can you walk us through that?
Sure. When I came to Susman Godfrey, when I interviewed in the Los Angeles office after my clerkship, there were 4 lawyers in that office. It was a relatively young office, and though the firm had a national reputation, but it had this relatively new developing Los Angeles extension. And at the time, it was probably different than maybe where I envisioned starting my career. I probably thought I would start in a bigger environment, in maybe a more established office. Something about the energy of being in that place where there was a lot of opportunity to be involved in growing the office appealed to me. And I mention that because I think a lot of times for all of you who are thinking about career choices and what's going to lead you down the road to something like leadership in the legal profession, you do have to do things that might be off the beaten path. I wouldn't describe it as a major risk given the nature of the firm, but it was different than what I had originally envisioned. But it gave me an opportunity to really think about how to grow and cultivate other lawyers. I was very involved in growing the office, which is now 25 lawyers, making decisions, administrative to employment to how we were going to expand our business in the market. And that was really formative for me, made me feel that I had understood different aspects of the business than I would have otherwise. When I came to the firm, there was not a diversity committee. And one of the things I really loved about the firm is the opportunity to do things differently. And I started one. So I served as the chair of the diversity committee for a long time, but also one of its founders. And I worked on training and employment. But there really can be little doubt that to make the next move into management, it's very important to be involved in the core management of the firm in terms of making decisions about compensation or firm policy. And in 2016, I became a member of the firm's executive committee. And that's a committee that approves all the major policies and considers the major financial issues and other business issues of the firm. And that really provided a stepping stone for me moving into this position.
Yeah, and now that you are in this position, what are your goals and what do you hope to accomplish now that you're in that position where you can make those things happen?
I have a lot of goals for the firm, of course. A lot of them are about continuing what we have done well and have excelled at. I do view our firm as a unique culture. We are a trial litigation boutique. We're also a firm that really likes to focus on results. And for that reason, we do a lot of risk sharing with clients. No matter what side of the V they're on, or even if they're a corporate client, where we really try to align our incentives with theirs. And so we're very creative about how we arrange that and how we think about their success and how that aligns with us being successful. So part of my job is definitely being out there, sharing that message to new potential clients and in new industries where we maybe haven't practiced as regularly. Within the firm, certainly working with the younger lawyers, diverse and female lawyers included, in mentoring them about development and about how we litigate cases. I think we very much view our brand of litigation as distinct, encouraging lawyers to think about the end goal, the end game, how you successfully win, how you get to the end result and not get mired in many of the distractions that come along the way when you're litigating. So I view that as a very important part of my job, is to carry on those traditions of the firm and those teachings of the firm, but also to cultivate a lot of new lawyers who are coming in and reminding them of our philosophy and shaping them in that way. I would also say I have goals that are outside the firm and really more about the profession, and doing what we're doing here today is part of it. It's being able to speak to groups, to share my views about being a diverse female lawyer in the profession, things we can be doing better, places where we are not doing such a good job. It is a luxury to be in the position I'm in, to be able to be maybe a bit more candid about some of those things. And so I view that as absolutely one of my goals, to talk about it, to maybe open the door and the curtain, and so we can all peer in and see and maybe have more frank conversations to advance our goals. Because I do think while there are a lot of organizations and firms and professional groups aimed at trying to enhance the diversity of the legal profession, there are places we could be doing better across the board. And so I like to think that that is something I can help with, and is certainly one of the goals I have in this position.
That's great. And we'll definitely unpack some of what you just mentioned a little bit later. Obviously, your firm, Trial Litigation Boutique, what excites you about trial practice?
Before I went to law school, I was a reporter, which some folks know about. I worked for the Associated Press in DC, and I really liked fact gathering. I liked the life of a daily reporter. It was very exciting to me. And so I kind of went into law school with a different appreciation for the fact gathering aspect of our work. Law schools are great at teaching, analyzing legal theory and unpacking cases, but not so much teaching how you really build a story or a case from the ground up by dealing with individuals. And that was part of my job I really enjoyed as a reporter, and it translated well into being a litigator and a trial lawyer. I have a lot of cases where I learned the most from our witnesses or from talking to third parties and figuring out aspects of the case that way. So that sort of naturally drew me to trial practice. It's interesting, the AP is a very consumer broad-based medium. And so my writing was for this very large, wide group of people. And I really like that. And I view that the ability to translate that skill into the legal profession as a valuable one. It's great to be able to argue and present your positions to judges and courts. But there's definitely something very special about talking to a jury and getting them to see your point of view, your client's perspective, and trying to connect with them. So those are things that I felt were really compelling, inviting to me, and sort of brought together a lot of other skills that I had enjoyed developing before I even got to law school.
Yeah, that's great. And as you sort of progressed through your career, was there anything that surprised you in terms of, wow, this is actually really exciting too, and this is something that I really enjoy, that maybe you hadn't anticipated before starting your career?
I don't know going into my career that I knew how deep into some types of technical cases I would end up getting. I certainly was interested in media issues and internet issues generally. I don't know at the time if I thought that meant I would end up doing a lot of patent cases, which I have done over the course of my career. I expected I would do some copyright and maybe some trade secret, but I felt, when I was a reporter, I wrote a lot about telecommunication networks and communication policy, and it required me to get in the weeds, like actually learn about co-location, all this technical telecom jargon. And that positioned me to be a little more comfortable to take on highly technical cases. I don't have a technical background. I was a comparative literature major. Aside from parsing words, it doesn't really prepare you to necessarily analyze certain types of software. But I really like that challenge. It's a whole other layer on top of learning the law, learning the facts, is really getting comfortable with the technology. And so I was surprised at how much I like doing that, especially in areas like patents where it can be pretty demanding to learn. But once you do, you really feel a sense of accomplishment that you've learned something hard, substantively hard, that you can explain to other people.
Right. Yeah. And like you, I'm an antitrust lawyer. And I think, whenever we have matters, it's a deep dive into industries that, we may have never even heard of, or unfamiliar with. And I'd be curious to know if there's anything that's specific about antitrust litigation that you find, particularly interesting or exciting.
It is really intellectually challenging. I find it one of the most intellectually challenging areas in which to practice. And that's for a lot of reasons, that just by the nature of the law, the often changing landscape of antitrust precedent. It's very interesting. My firm was actually founded primarily doing antitrust class work, antitrust individual competitor cases. And as the law ebbed and flowed in some of those areas, so did our practice in there. But it's a fascinating area to track. I mean, right now we see the advent of a whole bunch of monopolization cases, and there had been a period where public and private enforcement of Section 2 claims was relatively quiet. So I think that aspect of it, that it's shaping and moving around dynamic areas like how do you apply antitrust law to big technology, is one of the things that makes it fascinating. And I also think really intellectually challenging.
Yeah, right. Looking back on your career, is there a single case or a victory that you're really proud of that you can talk about with us?
Well, probably not too surprisingly, our jury verdict in the House Canary case, we tried that case for almost 3 weeks in San Antonio State Court. It was a trade secret, misappropriation, breach of contract, and fraud case. My client, House Canary, was actually the counterclaimant. The case was brought by another party, originally as a breach of contract dispute. Not solely because of the size of the jury verdict, which is on appeal, but it was $706 million. But it just really embodied the reason that trial work is so fun and exciting. It was really a case where there were facts that we were learning in real time during trial, where we would have to modify strategies and ideas and make game time decisions about witnesses to call or how much time to spend cross-examining somebody. Had we gotten enough? What more did we need to probe? And I felt like it was really the type of case that shows why trial is such a unique experience too. You can spend all this time developing a case, and we had spent a lot of time developing a case about being a defendant and defending against a breach of contract case. And as we got closer to trial, we realized, no, this case is about something totally different. It is about theft of our trade secrets. And so we had to retool completely the story and develop it on a relatively short order to tell the jury and to unpack for them what had happened, and the value of our clients' technology, which is related to real estate valuation. So for me, it was like the quintessential case about, why trial lawyering is so much fun and so dynamic and really gives you the opportunity to deal with strategy and respond to things as they come in real time. So there was certainly a career highlight, and who knows if I'll ever have a case that interesting again, because it was filled with many twists and turns.
Yeah. Maybe we can kind of use that as a segue where I'm sure you have many passions, but at least two of them where they meet, which is trial work and making sure that there's inclusion, diversity and inclusion. And you recently wrote an article that was published by Law 360. It's titled Preparing the Next Generation of Female Trial Lawyers. It's a great read. I encourage everyone to go and look that up and have a read for themselves. But in it, you mentioned that something that made a significant difference for you, perhaps earlier on in your career, was that there was a commitment, maybe on behalf of the firm or a particular partner or maybe another associate, to having assignments divided up among all trial team members, including associates. So, when I read that, the first question that came to mind was, well, who made that commitment? I'm really curious. And it sounds like that commitment was upheld, and that kind of speaks to perhaps the culture that was at your firm. So if you can just sort of speak to that.
It's really an innovation of Steve Susman. It is something he believed in from day one, which is that you build a trial team. Everybody on the team should be deep in their knowledge. They know what happens from the things they're working on to the things everybody else is working on. They're not siphoned off into some particular part of the case. They know the case top to bottom. And we give associates a lot of responsibility during the course of the case: depositions, hearings, meet and confers. So I believe that's part of the development process, so that when trial comes around, it's not unusual to our clients or to our teams that young lawyers expect that they're going to have a role at trial, and that we're going to try to facilitate to make that happen. Steve Susman very much had the view that everybody goes to trial together from the team that started, and you divvy up trial work accordingly. When I came to the firm, one of my first tasks was my now co-managing partner handed me a list of something like 400 witnesses. This was a case he had been working on for several years. He said, Kalpana, we're going to go to trial in this case in 6 or 7 months. And I have this huge master list of witnesses, but I would like you to figure out which 30 witnesses we should call at trial. He sent me the list. He sent me on my way. I spent the better part of the next 3 months going and traveling and meeting with all these potential witnesses. And I was a little floored because he had not met me in person yet when he gave me that assignment. And I thought, how does he know that I even know what a good trial witness looks like? But, I felt that he expected me to rise to the challenge. And so I worked really hard to try to figure out what these witnesses were like and rank them and develop a relationship with them. And we didn't end up going to trial that year. The trial got delayed, and so it went the next year. And we more or less followed the witness list that I had developed. And I had become close to some of these witnesses in terms of talking to them regularly. I knew what they were doing. They felt comfortable around me. They trusted me to help prepare them. And when we actually tried the case, which was also a very lengthy case, I put on or defended about 15 or 16 witnesses. And at that point, I had been at the firm for 15 months. So they have that principle of sharing trial assignments, of giving young lawyers the opportunity to do major arguments, of handling depositions on their own. That is one of the founding principles, frankly, of the firm. And I benefited from it a lot because it's not just that you are developing the skill in the moment. You are also letting people see what you can do because of those stand-up opportunities or trying cases. Another lawyer might refer you a case or might remember your work later on and want the opportunity to work with you on something. So I really do believe that having those visible moments is, they have value in and of themselves in terms of learning, but they also plant the seed for a much broader and longer career. And I've been vocal about my view that it's unfortunate some of the limitations we see in terms of diversity in the courtroom. I know there are a lot of very talented, diverse and female lawyers on these cases where I'm against parties. I see them in meet and confer, sometimes in depositions. I know they're on the pleadings, but when it comes time for that big argument or for trial, I stop seeing them regularly. And I had a period where I saw almost no women in major arguments for a significant period of time. And I have had times where I've gone up to opposing counsel and said, you really ought to let that person on your team take a witness or do an argument. So it is an area where I believe the rubber hits the road. If you're committed to advancing diverse and female lawyers in the profession, it is really imperative that they get the chance to show their skills, to be front and center in court, to handle the big arguments, to do things at trial, and not simply be a member of the team, but to have these opportunities that are going to be formative for their long-term success.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a really positive experience just from your early days with the firm. And unfortunately, as you alluded to, there are probably many of our colleagues, across the bar that aren't experiencing those same opportunities. What do you think are, the hurdles that remain, the obstacles that are making it difficult for inclusion to really happen?
There are a few things. One that I hear, and I talked a little bit about it in the article, is that sometimes you will hear firms say, I don't know that the client would like this younger lawyer to do something. And that younger lawyer may be diverse or may be a woman, but as part of our growth in the profession, it is really necessary that those opportunities flow to younger lawyers. I feel that advocates who want to really see true inclusion have to push back on that notion. Your client will become comfortable with your diverse and female or young lawyer handling something significant if you signal to them that it is appropriate for them to do so. Mm-hmm. So that is one area where I really believe that change is possible. It just requires working harder at it and getting clients used to that concept, which I think they will embrace when they meet people individually. We obviously see nationally huge drop-off in the profession, particularly among women of color as they go through the ranks. And, I think it's important for them to know that there are opportunities to not just succeed or become a partner, but to also develop business and to be successful in that sphere. And to make sure that people see that long game, leaders in the profession need to make sure that diverse and women lawyers are being included in pitches, are thinking about business development, are considering how they might be successful in a broader way. Because if you don't really see where you're going to end up or what you could achieve, it can be hard to say, I want to continue down this road. And so we need to be putting a better light on what lies on the other side, what are the opportunities there, and facilitating some of that by actually bringing in those lawyers so that they see firsthand what they could be doing.
Mm-hmm. And that really sounds like an exhortation to leadership. What would be, advice or exhortation that you would give to associates or maybe junior lawyers, whether they're, maybe in-house or in the government?
We're in a moment right now where at least outwardly, a lot of organizations have committed to diversity. Certainly this year and the events of the summer and the racial injustice movement has opened a lot of eyes, and we've seen a lot of commitments that have been made. And if you're a young lawyer, if you're an associate, it is a time where you should really make sure that you're taking those opportunities as they become available. If you know that, for example, somebody in your firm is going to go pitch a company that has said outwardly that they want a certain level of diversity in their teams, you should ask to participate in that pitch or offer to help maybe get materials ready. Make sure that you are making yourself visible and paying attention to where those opportunities exist. I have seen a number of courts and judges be very vocal as well about wanting to see more diverse slates of lawyers in their cases before them, wanting to see more women lawyers in court. A number of judges have standing orders that say, I will normally take arguments, briefs under submission, but if a young lawyer is going to argue, I will keep the argument on calendar so that they can have the opportunity. If you're a young lawyer, make sure you know who those judges are and whether they have such an order, because that's an opportunity for you to go to the partners on your team and say, this judge is willing to let us argue our motion if a young lawyer does it, so can I have that chance? So I do think opportunities are opening up. It's not always easy to say to associates or to young lawyers that it's on you to push yourself forward and to make sure people know you're available for the opportunities. But we are in a moment where that exists, and so don't lose sight of that. Make sure you know what companies, what potential clients of the firm, what courts are advancing important diversity goals so that you can be a part of it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And, I think, as you mentioned, we are in a moment of change in a positive way, but we're also dealing with impacts from COVID, frankly. I think there's been an impact to D&I funding, budget constraints, not only the legal profession, but perhaps other industries across the economy. How do we sort of, work within that tension? It seems like we're making positive strides and we're having these external difficulties to work against. Any thoughts there?
There are a lot of challenges in this moment. For a lot of individuals who might have been able to pitch themselves in person, or who might find that certain types of events help them in their own networking, or diverse organizations that might have assisted them, that is not possible in our moment. And I recognize that. I've certainly heard from young lawyers that have talked about even their own challenges in job searching, and maybe being in competition with much senior lawyers who are on the job market. And all of those as a function of where we are economically and COVID. I also believe that there are some benefits to the world that we have evolved into right now, which is the chance to get perhaps more individual mentorship than you might where you had to reach out to somebody on the other side of the country or make plans to see somebody in person. If you are a young lawyer and there's somebody you view out there as a potential mentor, a potential connection, in our new virtual environment, it is so much easier to reach out and say, can you spend 10 minutes on Zoom with me talking about challenges I'm facing in my career? And you can do that with anybody in the country. So it is a difficult time, and the networking is definitely different, but I would certainly emphasize that the virtual opportunities are ones that maybe have opened up different doors for people. Another one that I've talked to some other younger lawyers about is being able to speak on panels or doing presentations online. Again, because we're all meeting largely in this format, there are more opportunities for a younger lawyer to perhaps participate in something where they can show people, this is how I present myself, or speak about an area of the law in which they're knowledgeable. Those are all, I believe, important marketing, networking efforts that diverse lawyers can engage in to help build their own profile. And in a time where there are a lot of other challenges to what we're doing, those are some that I would take advantage of.
Yeah. And this event is a great example of being able to take advantage, I think, of the plus sides that we're seeing now with the virtual world that we're living in. And as Erica mentioned at the outset, this Fireside Chat is being co-sponsored with a lot of organizations, minority bar associations. Can you? And I know that you're very active and have been for a while in those organizations. So can you maybe speak to the importance of maybe getting plugged in and how it can be a resource for the attorney, but also how the attorney can contribute to the association for the benefit of the bar at large?
I'll talk about the resource side first, and maybe just from a personal level, the kind of outreach and support I've gotten from SABA and APABA and Women Connected and lawyers affiliated with that, it's been amazing, so moving, such a reminder of why I took on this role. If I can say anything to any of you out there who are involved in these organizations, the support has not gone unnoticed at all. When I got these emails and calls from people across these different bar organizations, it just reinforced how important it is to have those connections, to have those relationships. In SABA, our conferences in the old days used to be, when I started practicing, used to be relatively small. It was a group that largely knew one another. We knew what practice areas we were in, what we were working on, which also made it a great opportunity to refer cases among one another. And as our group has grown, we've become more involved in how we're doing that referral process, but we are still, we have kind of an internal listserv to seek out potential referrals. So that is a really tangible way in which these groups can help one another. It's also, for me at least, these groups have also been a safe space to talk about challenges, opportunities, things that have gone well, things that we think need work, and general issues in our profession. And that's not always easy for people to find. When you walk in the door to a firm or a legal job where there may not be anybody who looks like you, it is reassuring to know that there are these other outlets and groups where you can potentially raise issues you're having, or reach out to somebody and say, I'm dealing with this. How did you deal with this in your career? And I definitely think that the minority bar associations, the women's groups have been extremely important in that regard. A place where people can talk a little bit openly about whatever challenges, but also get ideas about how they can tackle issues that they're facing, especially if they're not necessarily finding people just like them in the workplace that they could go to.
Yeah. And these organizations are definitely a fantastic resource for its own membership. But I think also we've seen the power of these organizations to really put pressure on, maybe GCs in-house, on firms to make sure that there is some serious thought and effort made to growing a diverse bar. And I think that's something that we've discussed, amongst ourselves in our respective organizations. Is there anything that you've seen work really well and be effective to push diversity and inclusion?
Asking GCs not just to account for how many diverse lawyers they're employing, but really talking to them about how they allow people to pitch for big cases or significant cases. That is an important step, and I've seen some groups approach it that way, which is, how do you allow new lawyers to break into your circle, sort of inner circle of lawyers that you rely on and depend on? I also think organizations like the minority bar groups and the women's groups that invite a lot of corporate counsel and GCs to their conventions and conferences. That has a huge benefit. Those lawyers who are in-house are getting a chance to meet and interact with perhaps lawyers that they wouldn't otherwise. And what I find is it can be really hard for a company to say, we have this very significant litigation that just got filed or that we want to file, and we are going to go out and solicit new lawyers that we have never even met before. And we're going to ask them to handle this potentially bet the company matter for us. It's hard for a lot of companies, and their default is to say, our board's really not going to like that. They'd much rather go with somebody they know, or it's just easier to work with people who we've seen their work product before. And on some level, that's understandable that they have that feeling. So before you get to the point of there being actual work to disperse, it's really important that in-house lawyers have a chance to meet and see, interact with, talk to those lawyers who may eventually come back to them and pitch them. And I do believe that the organizations that are providing that forum and really allowing and encouraging that kind of interaction are planting the seed for the diverse lawyers to then have the opportunity later on. And so that's less of an initiative and more of creating the space for it to happen. But it is critical, because it is not such an easy task to say to a diverse lawyer, walk in the door to a big company and ask for business and expect that their most significant business of that company is going to come to them the next time around. There's relationship cultivating that has to happen. And these organizations can play a huge role in that. You're getting to meet in-house lawyers who have been invited to attend and develop relationships with them that will hopefully yield business down the road. I do know some organizations have been more specific about their calls to action. They want to know what the numbers look like. They want to know what the plan is for retention and mentorship. And that really can also force firms to assess and analyze where they're going. What I really hope we see is that the firms who made a commitment this year and the organizations who made a commitment this year to diversifying, to inviting more diverse lawyers to interview, to retention efforts, that they stand by those in the long run. It is not a one-year process. It's not a 6-month process. And so many of those commitments that were made in the summer of 2020, we really need to be mindful and watchful that they are carried out over a long period of time, because it does take a long time. And even if you have, as a firm or as a in-house legal department, have said, we are going to aggressively interview and hire diverse lawyers, it's going to be several years before you see the full fruition of that as they move through the pipeline in those organizations. Yeah.
And, sort of as we wrap up our time before some Q&A, I think that that's a great point to sort of end on. There's a lot of positive movement, there's opportunity, but I think on the flip side, we kind of have to make sure there's accountability to make sure that there's follow through. And while there's a lot to look forward to and celebrate in terms of progress, we know that unfortunately, it may still be a reality where we're still experiencing sexism or racism. And maybe just how do we deal with that? How do you deal with that? And how do we, be the bigger person and, go high and kind of overcome these challenges when we are seeing such a great, I'd see really a sea change, across the profession at large.
Well, I'll say a little bit about this in terms of how my view has developed and evolved over time. When I was a younger lawyer, I would say I had more of a thick skull approach, which was, I don't have the bandwidth to take on every comment that I hear that might be laced with racism, sexism, a microaggression. I don't have time to do that. I still have to litigate and do my job. And a part of me also felt that being really successful would be its own best revenge for people who wanted to use those tools to stop me from those goals.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was alone in that. I won't characterize how maybe other women or diverse lawyers at the time felt, but I certainly got the feeling that there was much more of a grin and bear it mentality, and not that people were told to do that, but perhaps felt that that was the better path to lead to long-term goals. And it may very well have been, because you do see some changes in my generation, in my vintage, in terms of success in the profession. My view on that is different now. Today, I am likely to speak up about some issues, not for me, but often because I do have teams of lawyers that include young women and diverse lawyers. And I want them to know that if somebody said something that made them uncomfortable, they don't need to have a thick skull approach. It's their choice, and it's very personal, but we are in a different era, and there is benefit in picking and choosing your battles, but also calling out behavior that is not acceptable. So I do it sometimes. I often do it in a way that works for me, which can be to do it with a joke or a jest or something that's entertaining. I had a lawyer on the other side who kept sending me all these emails where he referred to me as Mr. Srinivasan, and it really didn't take long and you could say that that was maybe a microaggression. And so I started sending him emails back that referred to him as Mrs. So-and-so. And the young women on my team thought that was really quite funny. It didn't bother me, and frankly, it was probably something I might not have noticed, but I do want young female lawyers and young diverse lawyers to feel empowered about it. It is your decision to make, but we are in a different environment. And certainly for the lawyers I work with, if I see something where I think there's an opposing lawyer taking advantage of the fact, particularly that they're young, but also that they may be female, may be diverse, that's not something I'm going to stand for. And I'm probably more interventionist than others might be. But it is still challenging and hard to hear things or to have people behave in a way that you think is, they still have this residual view that maybe you aren't the lead person, or you aren't the representative for the client, and it tends to manifest in different ways now that I'm at this stage of my career, but it still happens. And I try to, especially when there are other eyes on me, to handle it in a way that signals that it's okay to raise it. We have to find a productive way to talk about it. Otherwise, it's not going to change nearly as fast.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your insights and your advice, and giving us your perspective from all things related to, being in leadership, to being a woman of color, and really being a trailblazer, talking about D&I, talking about trial work. We have a diverse, I think, group of attendees that are tuning in to this webinar, and I think we are running a little bit out of time, but one of the questions that came in was, what's something that has impressed you as a partner when you look at younger lawyers, and what are they doing right? What would you encourage young lawyers to continue to do as they kind of make their way up, hopefully, to pathways to leadership? What are things you would discourage folks from doing? And I guess sort of a third part to that question too is, if there are folks right now who may be looking for a job and need to really set themselves apart and put themselves in there, if there's any advice that you can give to them.
Sure. Thanks, Esther. I'll start with the latter question first. In the job market, it is important to really distinguish your skill set. And what I mean is to really explain to potential employers what it is you've learned to do, what you've done, not in generic terms, not just in, I worked at this firm before, but very specifically what you worked on. You got to handle depositions, you handled major briefing in X kind of case, you handled an argument involving Y. Get into the specifics of why you should stand out as a candidate. It goes without saying that you absolutely should be researching the place you're applying to and really learning about what they do. And again, it is perhaps as easy as a Zoom call to ask a young lawyer there or somebody you know to really give you the lowdown and the insight, but do your research. And although we are, your interviews may be online as opposed to in person, you are on all the time. So make sure you are giving your best presentation when you are in front of the camera. And if you're presenting written work, it's totally critical right now that your written work really reflect your best work product, because so much of what we're doing these days is dependent on brief writing and our communication, especially in the COVID era. So really make sure those things are as strong as they can be to support your application, your employment application. On your first question, Esther, I talk a lot to my own associates at the firm about what I hope for them, which is that they will be able to develop judgment as to cases and decision-making and strategizing about those cases. Some of the mechanics of litigation we can refine over time, improve brief writing, give people feedback on how to be a more effective depo taker. But cultivating judgment is really a whole separate thing. And so one thing as a young lawyer that you can do is to make sure you take a run at demonstrating your best judgment and best assessment of a case. So if the other side sends you an email making a proposal or complaining about an issue, send it on to your team with your recommendation about what to do next. It may not be right, or other people on the team that are senior to you may say, I don't think this is a good idea in this case. But that's how you cultivate your judgment. Now you know that's not the right response, and next time you'll do it a different way. What you don't want to do is send it along and crowdsource for ideas from your superiors. That's a chance that you have to show that you've thought critically about the issue, or that you have a recommendation, you have a strategy call that you propose. And even if it's not the right one, that's okay, because that's part of what you're learning as you go along. But it tells a partner a lot when you have analyzed a brief or a motion from the other side and made your best recommendation about what the next steps are. Or when you let your partners on your team know that you spent some time thinking about the big picture issues in the case, or discovery in the case that's needed. Things that reflect that you've stepped back and have given some thought to where the case needs to go. And I know it's not easy, especially when you're a young lawyer in the throes of day-to-day litigation. You have so much to do. You're trying to meet deadlines. You're trying to get through the day. But it's really, really critical, both for your development and for demonstrating to your superiors that you are aware of what's happening all around you in the case and what's going to need to happen 3 or 4 steps down the road, not just what needs to happen today or tomorrow. So consider something like a 10,000-foot email, that's what I like to call it, where you walk through open issues in the case, or here are some fact issues we really need to make sure we button up before we get that summary judgment motion. Those are the kinds of things that I like to see that suggest to me that somebody's making that transition from being a younger lawyer where they're very task oriented to developing into a lawyer who can run a case top to bottom. And of course, going to the other side where you're a partner who's pitching the skill to be able to take a case from day one to trial, to appeal, to settlement, because ultimately that's the goal.
Right. Well, this has been a very inspirational and very informative time speaking with you, and it's been a pleasure. I'm going to hand it over back to Erica for some closing remarks.
Thanks to all of you for joining us tonight, especially Kalpana and Esther, but also our co-sponsors, Diya TV, and all of you in the audience. We really hope you'll also consider joining APABA-DC for future programming, including next Thursday's 40th anniversary kickoff celebration and our next Women Leader event on January 14th with Jessie Liu. You can RSVP for all of those programs and learn more about APABA-DC and our Women's Forum at our website, apaba-dc.org. Thanks to everyone and have a great night.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.